Dave, may I ask you a question and then you also make a comment on your answer? Did you really mean that as a question on this talk?
Well, if you
about
address it,
acquired,
you can.
about acquired, that you don't see how the acquired player can lead to the love of God? Did you really mean that as a question?
Well, yes, I do mean that. Christ died on the cross to take away the sins of the world, period. Well, the question is not getting God to love us. There are people
But to
who think
acquire
that.
the love, that's what theosis is.
I know
And
that.
it's only, and if you look at St. Gregory Palamas and an ocean of the divine energy, that we become participants in the energy of God. I think that's the answer to that, in some way.
I can see that phrase being interpreted three different ways.
Absolutely.
One is to acquire the ability to love as God loves.
Yes,
One is to acquire the love and high regard of the divine. And the third is to acquire that participation in God, who is love.
Yeah, that's, I mean,
They're quite
it's an
different.
answer.
My point is
But it's
that,
still, there is an answer.
Father, my point is that it will not do for us to use terms and think that people know what we mean.
That's right.
And we must make clear, there's plenty of times when we have to use poetry because there is no other way to talk about it. But we need to know that we're using poetry and not take the metaphors.
We know what we mean when we
Scientific.
say some things, and we think that the term or the phrase or even the concept is so well situated in our own societal or cultural paradigm that the person we're talking to must understand.
Right.
And it comes as a stark surprise sometimes to me that they don't.
Right.
And I actually have to, I was told today, don't put words in my mouth, and I didn't think I did, and then I have to stop and say, okay, I think you said this, am I right? Yes. Then what do you mean when you say this? And I had to listen and learn what is meant by the word forgiveness, because we can't assume certain things. And then,
You know, this is wonderful because we all come with our own psychologies, our own frame of reference. For you, the specific definitions are very important. For me, the poetic and symbolic immediately translate into something that I understand. So I almost feel, your talk, August, was very simplifying for me. What I heard was not complicated. If I were to reduce it to a few things, I would think about the processes leading to theosis and leading to this kind of internal freedom that really is paradise, even if you experience it for one day. And there are many words. The word for sin in Hebrew means missing the mark, which indicates that you have to go back and back and back. And all these things that you spoke about are part of ongoing, at least as it was heard by me, are part of ongoing processes. And I had loved that passage from Brothers Karamazov, which I read when I was very young and had no real understanding when you read it today, but there it all is. And we are in a constant process in every human relationship of constantly translating. Even my husband, whom I've known for a very long time, I've got to translate a lot of his behaviors and words and so on, and that's part of the compassion, that understanding it, and it sometimes isn't literal. And so, I mean, that's just, every one of us, I think, would have a different response to these things, but your talk was so, for me, it was really helpful and clear.
Nancy, I think that's why it's important to ask questions too. We can't read, like with our spouses,
Yeah.
we can't read our spouse's mind. And if we don't understand what they're trying to say, it's up to us to be responsible enough to ask the question.
Boy, it took
What
me
do
a
you
long
mean?
time to get that
Yeah,
right.
that shows a kind of maturity though, Nancy. It's a maturity of you as an individual and also your marriage. And, I noticed the first few years of my marriage with my husband, how difficult that was. Like, you have this inner dialogue, like, well, he should know what I mean by, what I mean by this, but He doesn't. He's not me. He doesn't think like me. But anyway, getting back though to, the words that are used and not always knowing the meanings. A lot of times things can get lost in translation. And that's why it's important for us to turn to our spiritual leaders. So if we don't understand or might accidentally take certain words out of context and misconstrue it, go to our spiritual fathers or go to the church priest and say, what does this mean? Help me to understand this. Say it in a way that I can comprehend. So, and I think that's why a lot of people have struggles with understanding certain things about even their own religion, about their own faith.
There's a quotation, I can't remember, it might have been Albert Camus, I'm not sure, saying, those who name things wrongly contribute to the destruction of the world. You might have noticed that on the front of your booklet here that I termed the conference theme, Forgiveness, Finding Wholeness Again. And we heard a lot about healing in terms of Eva Core and others. And I'm just reminded that after September 11th, I started saying a prayer which I didn't think in terms of forgiveness or even of healing or wholeness, but now I sort of realize that intuitively that's what I was trying to do. That ever since 9/11, anytime I see a plane, I say, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, forgive me, have mercy on me, a sinner. Have mercy on the crew and passengers of that plane overhead. Have mercy on all those who travel by plane, train, boat, automobile, military vehicle, and spacecraft. Have mercy on the murderers, the rapists, the child molesters, and all those with whom I disagree. Have mercy on all your children, Lord. You who are everywhere and fill all things, come and abide with us and save us by your grace. And then it's reciting on some other things. But I think for me it was saying, now that this has happened, the healing or the rebuilding has to start right away.
One, two, three.
I would draw on some of my experiences from the Holy Mount. I spent some time at Mount Athos visiting the monasteries in over a period of years. And one of the, and this, I say this only to encourage us all to be who we are, to maintain our individuality. I think that's critically important in creation, that we don't acquiesce to perceptions imposed on us or that we gather that we think will ingratiate us to God. God doesn't expect that of us, I don't believe. And an example of that in my mind is the monasteries of Mount Athos, where there are 20 or so of them, and they're immeasurably beautiful, and the lifestyle of the monks is shared quite, yet every single one is profoundly different from the other. Each brotherhood has gravitated to spiritual guides, of course, and Yerondas and teachers of a certain type, but they also, intuition. Somebody mentioned intuition, I think you did, Alex, just now. They rely on their intuition, as I see it, their spiritual intuition, which is something that is really available to us, I believe, and I'm sure they do, because one monastery, I mean, the music in one is sublime. The horticulture in another is. The food in a third is. They're all cohesive. They're all in communion. They love each other. They communicate with each other. They share everything, and yet they maintain their independence of an expression. And my first time there, my Greek, which has never really gotten to be very good, but it's improved some. I spent a month or so there, and I was baptized at a monastery, which is another story. But my spiritual father at that time spoke very little English, and I spoke very little Greek. And it comes to me, but your question comes to my mind because I think that the use of words doesn't do justice to anything that we're talking about. The mystedia, the Greek word for sacrament is mystedia. How can we possibly communicate with words, the mysteries? So I was always interested in having a serious theological, philosophical conversation with my spiritual father, of course, and here we were, like that, with our language. And finally, one day he just went like this, he said, Babylonia. and I accepted that as a teaching.